The wind came first, dragging dust across the empty yard like some old ghost that wouldn't leave. Then the door slammed open, hard enough to rattle the hinges, and he filled the frame. Her stepfather, a tall shadow reeking of whiskey and rage. His boots struck the boards like gunshots as he crossed the room. She didn't flinch when his hand came down. The crack echoed off the walls. She only staggered, a thin line of blood sliding from her lip, eyes fixed on the floor like looking up might cost her life. "You think you can shame me?" he spat, voice raw as a rusted nail. "Run off? Leave me looking like a fool?" No answer, only the fire snapping in the hearth, casting his face in devil-orange light. He grabbed her arm, shoving her toward the open door. Outside, the sky was the color of ash. "You listen here, girl," he bellowed, breath sour, words slurring together. "I'll break every dream you got, every hope. Crush it in my fist till there ain't nothing left." She hit the ground hard. Dust rose around her like smoke from a dying fire. From where she lay, the world was sideways. Boots, spurs, the sagging porch, the bottle swinging in his hand. "Please." Her voice was small, dry as paper. "Don't leave me here." He laughed, harsh and empty, before spitting in the dirt beside her head. Then he swung into the saddle, reins snapping. "You're nothing," he growled, and turned his horse toward the horizon. The sound of hooves faded slow, swallowed by the wind. For a long time she didn't move, just stared after him, dust clinging to her lashes. The prairie stretched endless, silent, except for the broken gate creaking on its hinges. Somewhere far off, a storm rumbled. She pulled herself to her knees, body shaking, fingers digging into the dirt like the earth itself might hold her up. The narrator's voice slipped in like the wind through cracked boards. That night, she learned the world could turn cold quick, and some men carried darkness in their bones. She whispered to no one, "Please, someone." But the prairie only answered with the howl of coyotes. The sun climbed slow, cruel as a whip. By midday it burned everything flat and lifeless, the whole desert breathing heat like the inside of a furnace. She stumbled through it, wrists raw where the rope had been, eyes squinting against the glare. Her dress clung, heavy with sweat and dust. Every step left a faint print that the wind erased almost at once, like the land itself wanted to forget her passing. Water. She thought of it the way dying men think of God, somewhere far off, maybe real, maybe not. A vulture circled overhead, black wings flashing like knives in the light. She watched it for too long, knees trembling, head spinning. The ground tilted and she went down hard, palms scraping on cracked earth. From far away came the faint jangle of spurs. A horse snorted. Her heart kicked weakly against her ribs. She lifted her head slow. Only heat waves, no rider, no help. "Please," her voice cracked apart. "Not like this." The sky was too big, the sun too loud. She crawled toward the dry creek bed, a shallow scar through the earth, lined with weeds brittle as paper. She dug with both hands, nails tearing at the dirt until blood mixed with dust. Nothing. Not a drop. The wind picked up, whistling through the mesquite trees like laughter from somewhere mean. Coyotes yipped far off, the sound threading through the air like a warning. She lay back at last, eyes shut against the brightness. Her breath came shallow, hands falling open at her sides. Somewhere in the spinning dark behind her eyelids, she saw her mother's face the way it used to be, soft, smiling, the smell of wildflowers on her dress. "Help me," she whispered to the memory, to the sky, to whoever might be listening. But the land held its breath. The narrator came low and steady, like the rumble of distant thunder. In that hour, death stood close, waiting, the kind of waiting that has no hurry, because it always wins. The girl didn't hear the horse this time, didn't see the faint glow of a lantern coming over the rise. Not yet. The night had teeth, cold and sharp, biting through the thin fabric clinging to her shoulders. She didn't feel the hooves at first, just a dull tremor through the ground. Then came the glow, a weak lantern light bobbing on the horizon, cutting through the dark like a promise. The rancher reined his horse at the creek bed, leaning forward in the saddle. He was older, broad-shouldered, with the look of a man who'd buried friends and outlived too many winters. The lantern in his hand caught her shape on the ground, small, still, broken-looking. He swung down fast, boots thudding in the dust. "Miss?" His voice was steady but low, like one speaks to a spooked colt. She stirred faintly, eyes fluttering at the light in her face. The wind rattled dry branches above, the only sound between them. "You hurt bad?" Her lips moved, but no words came. The rancher didn't wait for answers. He slid an arm under her shoulders, lifting her light as a sack of grain. She made a thin sound, halfway between a sob and a sigh, and her head fell against his chest. "It's all right," he muttered, voice rough but kind. "Ain't nobody gonna harm you now." His horse shifted, snorted steam into the cold air. By the time he rode into the yard of his ranch, the stars were high. The cabin windows glowed faint orange from the fire inside. He carried her through the door like a man bearing something fragile, set her by the hearth, wrapped a wool blanket around her shoulders. She blinked at the flames, eyes reflecting the firelight like a wild thing half-tamed. The rancher poured water from a tin jug into a cup, crouched down, held it to her lips. "Slow," he said. "Easy now." She drank, hands trembling against the metal. For the first time in hours, maybe days, the weight in her chest eased just a lade. Ettle. The crackle of the fire, the warmth creeping back into her fingers, the steady presence of the man moving quietly about the room. It felt like waking from a nightmare that hadn't quite let go. Outside, the wind died down. Inside, the cabin held. Morning came slow over the hills, painting the sky in pale stripes of orange and gray. The ranch was quiet, too quiet. The girl sat wrapped in the wool blanket near the fire, clutching a tin cup between both hands like it might vanish if she let go. That's when the sound carried in on the wind. Hooves. More than one. The rancher heard it before she did. He set down the kettle, reached for the rifle, leaning by the door. 3 riders appeared from the dust, silhouettes cut against the rising sun. The one in front sat tall, mean, wearing last night's whiskey like armor. Her stepfather. The girl froze, breath snagging in her throat. They reined up at the fence line, dust swirling around horse legs. The stepfather's grin was all teeth and no warmth. "She's mine," he called, voice flat as iron. "Hand her over." The rancher stepped onto the porch, rifle easy in his hands but ready. "Not today," he said. "Not ever again." One of the men spat in the dirt. The stepfather leaned forward in the saddle, eyes cold. "You think you can stand between me and what's mine?" The rancher didn't blink. "I already am." For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind tugged at hat brims. A loose board on the barn creaked slow, like the whole place was holding its breath. Finally the outlaw laughed, a low, ugly sound. "This ain't over," he said, yanking his reins hard. They wheeled their horses, dust boiling up behind them as they rode off the way they'd come. The girl sagged against the doorway, knees weak. The rancher lowered the rifle, but didn't relax. His eyes stayed on the horizon where the riders vanished. Inside, the fire popped in the hearth. The girl's hands shook around the cup, water sloshing over the rim. "They'll be back," she whispered. The rancher glanced at her, jaw tight. "Let 'em come." But even as he said it, the wind slammed the barn door shut with a hollow crack, like the land itself knew trouble wasn't done here. Not by a long shot. Dust still hung heavy in the valley when the sheriff rode in, a broad-brimmed hat shading eyes that had seen too many winters and too much lawlessness. His horse snorted as he slowed near the cabin, hooves crunching gravel. The girl watched from the porch, wrapped in the wool blanket, heart still hammering from the stepfather's morning visit. "Morning," the sheriff said, voice calm but carrying weight, like a bell tolling over the plains. He swung down from his horse, boots thudding on the boards. The rancher stepped forward, rifle now leaning against the cabin wall, eyes sharp. "You got trouble," the sheriff said. I hear whispers on the wind. That man of yours won't quit. The rancher nodded. I know, but she stays here, ain't going back. The girl's voice trembled, small but steady. He won't stop, will he? The sheriff crouched slightly, leveling his gaze on her. Some men, they carry darkness in their bones, but law don't blink. Law watches, law waits, and when the time comes, it rides hard. She looked at the fire crackling in the hearth, warmth spilling across her fingers, and dared a small breath. Hope felt fragile, but it was there. The sheriff stood, tipping his hat back. I'll be watching. You ain't alone, miss. The rancher laid a hand on her shoulder, firm and grounding. You hear that? Ain't nobody out here without backup. Not while I'm breathing. Outside, the wind tugged at the dry grass, bending it low. Dust swirled over the horizon where the stepfather had disappeared. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called, sharp and lonely, a reminder that the world could still be cruel. But inside the cabin, the air was steadier. The fire popped, sending sparks curling like tiny lanterns into the dark sea corners. The girl sipped water slowly, eyes meeting the rancher's. For the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. The sheriff's words lingered long after he rode off, hooves fading into the valley. Law's thin out here, but it ain't blind, he had said. The rancher returned to the fire, pulling his chair close. Rest now, he murmured. Tomorrow, we face whatever comes together. She nodded, letting the warmth sink into her bones. For the first time since last night, the horizon outside felt a little less empty, a little less hungry. And somewhere, deep down, she dared to believe that justice might ride in time. Night came fast, thick and heavy, smothering the valley in darkness. The wind whispered through the mesquite trees, carrying the faint scent of smoke from a distant campfire. The girl huddled near the hearth, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders, every creak of the cabin floor making her heart leap. Then came the torches. Flickering orange flames bobbing through the black, moving fast, 5 riders circling the ranch like predators. The stepfather led them, face twisted with rage, eyes glinting in the firelight. The rancher was already on his porch, rifle steady in hand, boots planted wide. He caught the first torchlight in his eyes, gauging their approach. "She's mine," the stepfather bellowed into the night, voice splitting the darkness. "No one takes her from me!" The girl pressed her face to the firelight, teeth clenched. Dust and embers swirled around her, sparks dancing like restless spirits. The first shot cracked the night, wood splintered, smoke rising as the rancher returned fire, each report echoing off the hills. Horses whinnied, hooves pounding against dirt, metal flashing in the torchlight. "Stay down," the rancher shouted, voice low but firm. She obeyed, curling into herself, blanket soaked with sweat and fear. The cabin shook with eeks, each bullet hitting the boards, each torch threatening to ignite the dry grass. Outside, the outlaws pressed closer, shouting, swinging rifles, knives glinting. The stepfather's fury burned hotter than the fire in their torches. "I'll have her," he screamed, voice raw, echoing against the night. The rancher shifted, firing carefully, every movement measured, protecting the girl like she was the only thing standing between him and madness. A spark leapt from a torch, catching the corner of the barn roof. Flames licked the timbers, sending a heat wave through the yard. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking, and the girl gagged, eyes watering. Through it all, the rancher stayed steady, a solid shadow moving between her and danger. His jaw was tight, eyes hard, as if daring them to cross the threshold. The narrator's voice cut in over the chaos, low and tense. The night itself seemed to howl with fury, and in that storm of fire, smoke, and fear, one truth held fast. Hope rides with the brave, even when the darkness comes for all. The girl clutched his arm, whispering, "Please, don't let them take me." He only tightened his grip, voice grim. "Not tonight. Not ever." The first pale light of dawn spilled over the horizon, dusted in pink and gold, washing the valley in an almost holy calm. But the echoes of last night's chaos still lingered, the smell of smoke, the splintered wood, the pounding of horses' hooves in memory. Then came the sound that cut through the tension like a bell, the steady rhythm of boots on gravel. The sheriff and his deputies had arrived, rifles glinting in the early sun, badges catching the light like tiny stars. The outlaws froze mid-step, torches still burning, eyes wide. The stepfather's face twisted with disbelief. "Law!" the sheriff barked, voice booming over the quiet plain. "Drop your weapons, now!" A tense pause stretched like a taut rope. The rancher stood at the porch, rifle lowered but ready, hand brushing the girl's shoulder. She pressed close, heart hammering against ribs like a trapped bird. The stepfather spat in the dust. "You can't touch me," he shouted. "Try me," the sheriff said, calm, eyes icy. "It's over, every one of you." One by one, the outlaws dropped their rifles, hands raised, faces pale with the realization that the tide had turned. The stepfather cursed, struggling against the ropes the deputies quickly looped around his wrists. The rancher let out a slow breath, eyes never leaving the horizon where the last of the gang had hoped to vanish. The girl stumbled forward, knees weak, and the rancher caught her with a steadying hand. The morning sun touched her face, warm and gentle, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel the shadow of fear pressing down. The sheriff's voice cut through the clearing dust. "These men answer for their deeds in court. Justice isn't fast, but it's steady." The narrator's tone came low and assured, filling the open valley. The darkness had ridden hard, but the law had ridden harder, and when it finally came, it carried the promise that no evil could outrun its reckoning. The girl turned to the rancher, voice trembling but firm. "Are they really gone?" He nodded, jaw tight but eyes softening. "Gone for good this time. Ain't nobody touching you again." The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows behind the cabins and barns, painting the valley in light. Dust settled. Horses nickered. The fire in the hearth crackled, matching the slow, steady pulse of relief that had finally reached her heart. Somewhere deep in the wind, the prairie whispered a simple truth. Justice waits and hope endures, even when darkness rides in on the storm.